Have you ever messed with something that you don't understand? And I'm not talking about when you were a kid and your friends used to dare each other to chant Bloody Mary 50 times in front of the bathroom mirror. What I mean is going somewhere unfamiliar and thinking you're safe just because you have a good feeling about what you're doing. Trust me, I know what it's like. You're having a good time. The adrenaline kicks in because you're experiencing something new. It's easy to disregard any rules that were outlined before you left. But it's this kind of recklessness that claimed the life of one of my friends when I was young. Poor, innocent soul who didn't need to die. This is the story of the dangers of disrespecting the supernatural forces which lurk in the shadows of certain places. I'll tell you the story as best I can. Though some of the details might be a little vague because this is more than 10 years ago. It was the summer in the town of Park Ski, California, and the heat was beating down on us as we walked down the same route that we had every day from school. But this fateful Friday, there was an air of excitement about our group. Well, at least between me and Emily. Jeremy wasn't so keen on our plan. What if someone sees us? We'll be in so much shit. My parents will probably ground me for life, Jeremy protested, booting a stone along the ground. The youngest of us three, Jeremy was a typical shy kid who tended to keep to himself around others. I'd known him since I was born. Our parents were very close. He's a sweet kid with a heart of gold, though he did lack some self-esteem and was bullied at school because he was scrawny. Oh, come on, don't be a pussy, said Emily. It's going to be awesome. We'll be the first people to ever do this. Emily, on the other hand, was the opposite. Outspoken, strong-willed, she was the one who came up with the idea to sneak into the water tank on the edge of town at night. The tank had been drained by the state water company for repairs. Emily knew this because her dad was good friends with one of the workers and had mentioned it at dinner the night before. At recess, Emily came bounding up to me, and Jeremy had commandeered us for the trip, saying how cool it would be to sneak in and check out the inside of the tank. While I thought it would be fun, if a bit dangerous, Jeremy wasn't super interested. The water tank in question was on the outskirts of town. It was a hulking, rusted monolith that I'd overheard some parents call an eyesore. It was well known that some of the seniors at our school would sneak through the fence around the tank during the summer to go swimming, but I never heard of first years doing it. I guess that was part of why Emily was so keen. If we pulled it off, we could brag about it at school and maybe even become popular for a while. Ty, you aren't going to bitch out on me too, are you? Emily asked. And I probably should have mentioned my name is Tyler, Ty for short. And while I really wasn't excited by the thought of being grounded again, I had to admit the idea of trespassing for fun, it sent a thrill through me. It gave me a sort of anxious feeling in the pit of my belly, but I couldn't deny that I was excited about it. I'm in. We both turned to look at Jeremy, who took a deep sigh and rolled his eyes. Fine, but you better know what you're doing, Emily. You should make sure that it's safe and shit. He trailed off. Emily grinned, grabbing a hold of a nearby street sign and swinging around it happily. Ain't nothing safe about what we're doing, she yelled. I'll see you tonight, at the place. After I finished tea, I told my parents that I was going over to Jeremy's place to play some video games, something that happened regularly on Fridays. The plan was that Jeremy would tell his parents that we were coming to my place to play video games, next-level mind games. But when we met in the middle of the street, I noticed that he hadn't packed light by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, his backpack was near overflowing. By contrast, I changed into some jeans and a jacket, put a torch and some snacks in my backpack, and that was about it. We all knew where to meet anyway. Dude, do you really need all that stuff? I asked Jeremy, looking him up and down. Jeremy nodded, unzipping his bag and producing a number of items, including a compass, water bottle, pocket knife, and a rain jacket. I want to be prepared, you know? You never know what could happen, he said. I think you're prepared, but are you ready for the ghoul that lurks in the tank? I said, shining my torch underneath my mouth and putting on a deep voice. Jeremy nudged me with his shoulder. Knock it off, dude. It's not funny. He lurks at the bottom. waiting to consume any who dare to enter. Seriously! Jeremy smacking into me harder this time. The force of the blow sent the torch out of my hand and into the air, turning end over end before smashing into the ground. I groaned, picking it up, to reveal the bulb inside had smashed. I pointed it at Jeremy, frowning. What am I going to do now? Lucky I brought two, said Jeremy, tossing me a new torch. The sun had well and truly set by the time we met Emily at the agreed meeting spot. We were standing at the beginning of what was known as the town's industrial estate, a failed experiment by the council to attract bigger companies to invest in the area. The space was left fairly bare, as only a few companies had actually invested in the space. There was a small solar farm on the left side, while a number of business hubs lined the right. The path down the middle led to a hill atop which the town's water tank stood. The hulking metal structure groaned in the wind as we approached, as if protesting being without the water usually inside. The light continued to fade as we walked. How are we going to get through that fence? Asked Jeremy as we neared the base of the hill. The tank was surrounded by barbed wire fence that stretched around its base. From where we were, I could see the iron zigzagging stairs on its side, but no way through the fence. There were a few construction vehicles around the outside, but I couldn't see anyone still around. That's why I brought these, said Emily, producing a pair of wire cutters from her backpack. Emily's green eyes shone in the darkness as she grinned at us. We're already trespassing. You want to add vandalism to our rap sheet? I asked, meeting her stare. I don't see any cameras. Do you? Emily shot back as we reached the top of the hill. Before Jeremy could add his own protests, Emily got to work creating a hole in the fence. I turned to look at Jeremy. He was staring up at the water tank, seemingly in a daze. You okay? I asked him, trying to see what exactly he was looking at. I didn't realize it was that tall, Jeremy said, gazing up at the rickety stairs on the side of the tank. Do you need me to hold your hand? I joked, before I also realized that the tank was at least 50 feet off the ground. Emily turned around. My work here is done. You guys okay? I quickly swallowed the lump in my throat and turned to face her. Yeah, let's go. Practically forcing Jeremy along with me, all three of us crawled through the small hole Emily had made in the fence. Inside the construction area were a number of workstations, as well as cranes, trucks, bulldozers, all bearing the Parkski Water logo. It was now completely dark, with the only light coming from our torches. The wind was howling, creating a chill that was only mitigated by the fact that we had all layered up, though some more than others. Inside the construction area were a number of workstations, as well as cranes, trucks, and bulldozers, all bearing the Parkski Water logo. It was now completely dark, with the only light coming from our torches. The wind was howling, creating a chill that was only mitigated by the fact that we all layered up, though some more than others. Jesus, I'm freezing, squealed Emily as we approached the stairs. She was wearing a long t-shirt but no jacket or jumper. The T had Fall Out Boy emblazoned on the front with an image of the band performing. Trust Emily to rep her favorite band in a situation like this. Probably should have been prepared, smugly said Jeremy. Yeah, well, you're prepared not to come at all, so... Emily was drowned out by a huge gust of wind, which blew into us onto the unprotected hillside. I staggered as the water tank made another loud groaning sound. Bracing myself on the ground, I looked over at the others. Emily was backed up against the construction trucks, while Jeremy had fallen over, dirt staining his jacket. As the wind subsided, I got to my feet and looked at the others. You guys all right? I asked. Emily nodded. Yeah, I think so. That was crazy. Jeremy, who had turned pale, didn't reply. You okay, Jeremy? I said, trying to meet his gaze, but he was staring off into space with a horrified look plastered on his face. His eyes were kind of glazed over, and his breathing was shallow. I think he's in shock or something, I stuttered, not entirely sure what to do. Emily walked over to Jeremy and placed her hand on his shoulder. Jeremy? You in there, buddy? Suddenly, his head snapped back. His eyes sparked to life. Oh, what the hell was that? Jeremy said, gasping in between each word. Emily put her left hand on Jeremy's shoulder, trying to get his attention. Look at me, Jeremy. Look at me. What happened? Jeremy finally looked at her. I heard someone in the wind. It's like a voice coming from in there, he said, extending a shaky finger and pointing at the tank. It was like some old lady, and when she was talking to me, I couldn't move. Emily and I exchanged a look. I was beginning to get seriously freaked out. What did she say? I asked him, anxiety building in the pit of my stomach. She was yelling. Something about her son. She was calling for help, Jeremy said, still seemingly dazed from the incident. Did you hear anything? I asked Emily. No. Did you? No. For a moment there was silence, as we all took in what had just happened. I never knew Jeremy to be someone who would make stuff up like that. He could be a wuss, sure, but I doubted that he'd make this up to get out of going into the tank, especially when we had already come this far. Trust me, I know what I heard, said Jeremy, crossing his arms. Dude, look, I believe you. What do you want to do? He said. I won't blame you if you don't want to go in, said Emily. That's freaky. No. Jeremy's answer took me by surprise. I was fully expecting him to back out. We go in there, we find her. If someone's in trouble in there, that we should help them, he said, his eyes narrowing. Do we actually know if there's someone in there? I mean, if there is, maybe we shouldn't go in, I said, my anxiety beginning to build. Oh, come on. Are we really going to let some creepy voice stop us after we've come this far? Questioned Emily, raising her eyebrows. If someone's in there, for whatever reason, there's 3 of us and 1 of them. So I ain't scared. I sighed and relented. All right. Let's go. The stairway leading up the side of the tank was very narrow, so we had to go in one at a time. Emily volunteered to be in the lead. I followed behind her, and Jeremy brought up the rear. The stairs creaked as we climbed them, the wind at our backs. My heart was pumping hard in my chest, the thrill of discovering something new racing through me. At the same time, I felt something akin to dread in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't help but replay Jeremy's words in my mind. She was calling for help. I shivered, a chill running up my spine. My hands clinging to the metal bars of the stairway were growing sweaty. We were now about halfway up the stairs, and I was resisting the urge to look down, keeping my eyes solely pinned on Emily's back. Oh man, I heard Jeremy say behind me. Just don't look down, Emily said as we passed the halfway point. Easier said than done. Suddenly, another gust of wind ripped through us, causing the stairs beneath us to shake. My eyes grew wide. Holy shit, I blurted out, trying to hold onto the side of the stairway. Emily squealed, trying to keep her balance in front of me. In that moment, my hand slipped off the hand railing and I fell back. Sticking my foot out to stop my fall, I almost twisted my ankle before I slammed chest first into the handrail. The collision knocking the wind out of me as I gasped for air. I gazed into the darkness below. Felt like I was looking down from a skyscraper. The trucks and cranes below looked tiny now, almost like toys. Taking a few breaths, I staggered back, rattled, but grateful to be alive. Jeremy put his hand on my back. Ty, you okay? Yeah, that was... Man, we are up high, I said. I think I almost peed myself, said Emily shakily. That drew a chuckle from Jeremy. First time you've been scared all night. You guys all right? I asked. I'm okay. Yeah. We should keep going before it gets any later. I glanced up at the remaining stairs on the top of the tank. They continued to wiggle as the wind blew through, not giving me the greatest confidence. I don't know, with the wind the way it is tonight, it doesn't look particularly safe, I said. No, we need to keep going. I frowned at Jeremy. This wasn't like him. Before the trip, he barely was even interested in coming. Why did he feel the urge to get in the tank as soon as possible? Why's that? I asked him. Someone's there. Then another word, Jeremy pushed past me and continued up the stairs. I glanced at Emily, who looked just as confused as me. But we couldn't leave him. We were too far in. We had to keep going, regardless of what was waiting for us inside the tank. Slowly, steadily, Emily and I followed Jeremy up the remaining stairs. Eventually, we reached the top of the tank, the cool night air whistling over our heads. From here, we could see the city lights dazzling in the distance. It was a really stunning sight. One I was tempted to capture. Pausing for a moment, I pulled my phone out of my pocket, clicked the unlock button, but nothing happened. I tried again. Still nothing. The hell? Emily turned around. What's up? My phone won't work. It's probably out of battery. I mean, you spent way too long on it in class. I sighed. Come on, just try yours. I really want to get a shot of the lights from up here. Emily reached into her pocket to produce her old school phone, the Nokia brick. Mine doesn't work any... Jeremy! I jerked my eyes to where Emily was looking. Jeremy had already made his way halfway down the stairway inside the tank, completely on his own. He had abandoned us without saying a word. The next few moments went quickly, as Emily and I bolted down the stairs after Jeremy. We yelled at him to slow down, but to no avail. As we got deeper into the tank, closer to the bottom, my mind was racing. Why was Jeremy acting like this? I'd never known him to abandon his friends like that. It was as if something had taken over him, possessed him, after he said that he had heard someone speaking from inside the tank. And that was exactly where we were heading now. The darkness seemed to swallow Emily and I as we stepped off the final step and onto the base of the tank itself. The space we were in was huge, but Jeremy was nowhere to be seen. The only sound was coming from water dripping from parts of the walls around us. The cloudy night sky was visible through the wooden slats on top of the tank. Ceiling now removed. Jeremy! Called Emily, moving further into the unknown surroundings. His name bounced around the walls of the tank, creating an echo that grew in intensity before drowning out. No response. He's got to be down here somewhere, I muttered, reaching into my pocket and producing my torch. I pressed down on the switch. Again, got no response. Just like my phone. Figures, I said, showing Emily that the torch no longer worked. It's like some kind of EMP or something. Emily turned to me. A what? Forget it, you don't play COD. Guys? The voice sounded shallow and sounded far away, but it was unmistakably Jeremy's. Jeremy! Emily broke into a run towards the voice. Keep talking, I yelled right behind her. I'm over here! We plunged forward, water splashing into the air as we ran through puddles. Just as I felt we were getting close to Jeremy, I heard Emily gasp, then fall forward, head over heels. She landed on the ground with a loud thud, and I managed to stop myself before I suffered the same fate. Shit, that hurt, muttered Emily. Looking down at the ground, I could see there was a pile of wooden slats stacked onto it, most likely left behind by the workers. As I bent down to help Emily up, who was lying crumpled on the ground, clutching her ankle, my eyes were blinded by an intense light filling my vision. Jeremy, is that you? I said, shielding my eyes with my arm. Oh man, I'm glad to see you guys, Jeremy said, pointing his torch down at Emily, sufficiently blinding her as well. I continued to help Emily up, but she broke free of my grasp and charged at Jeremy, shoving him in the chest. The hell are you thinking? She yelled, slightly limping. Why did you leave us like that? I honestly don't know. It was like I blacked out or something, Jeremy said, a response that stopped Emily in her tracks. You blacked out? Last thing I remember, it was Ty saying the stairs looked really dangerous at the top, and I was going to agree, but then it was like I skipped time. Next thing I knew, I was down here, Jeremy explained. He didn't look pale as he had before, which was reassuring to see, but I couldn't help but feel the urge to leave the tank right then and there. This entire night had been plagued by weird events, and I really just wanted to go home. I'm glad you're okay, but I don't really understand what's happening here. You're getting possessed, and none of us have our electronics. Well, except for yours, I said, pointing to Jeremy's torch. You almost blinded me, by the way, Emily chipped in. My bad. I'm just getting some bad vibes about this whole situation, I said, peering at the both of them in the light of Jeremy's torch. And just as Jeremy opened his mouth to respond, there was a loud crash from above us, and the sound of wood being broken. Quickly, Jeremy pointed his torch up, just in time to illuminate one of the wooden slats from the tank's roof, plummeting down directly at us. Without thinking, I grabbed Emily and pulled her away from the path of the falling timber. We hit the ground hard, just as the wood slammed into the ground, millimeters from our legs. I looked over at Jeremy, and he had also managed to barely avoid being squashed, managing to dodge out of the way on his own. At that moment, I realized I still had my arms wrapped around Emily as we laid on the ground. I blushed and quickly let go, getting to my feet. The hell was... I told you to come alone! I froze as the words bounced off the walls and reverberated in my skull. I clutched in my ears as they echoed around the inside of the tank. It sounded like they were coming from a woman somewhere ahead of us in the darkness. Jeremy's torch was no longer shining, leaving us completely blind. My heart thumped in my chest as I met Jeremy's gaze. I only want you. Suddenly, the sound of wood being torn apart returned. Another wooden slat crashed into the ground somewhere to our left. Oh God, I heard Emily whisper. We need to get the fuck out of here, I said, trying frantically to figure out which direction we had come from. My child. Another crash, this time closer as another piece of timber slammed into the ground. The woman's voice was so loud it left my ears ringing every time she spoke. I tried my torch. Of course, nothing. Feeling with my hands, I found Emily to my right. I grasped her hand tightly while searching for Jeremy with my left hand. Jeremy, grab my hand, quick! More slats began to fall around us, each one closer than the last. Bang, bang, bang! Finally, Jeremy's hands grasped mine. Wasting no time, I began to run, pulling them along with me. I tried vaguely to move in the direction that we'd come in, but hampering matters was the fact that Emily had clearly hurt her ankle when she tripped earlier, so she couldn't run as much or as furiously, with a limp. Emily, are you... Don't worry about me, just keep going, she said, clearly in pain. I prayed that I was going in the right direction, but it was impossible to tell in the darkness. We could be running around in circles for hours. And just as I was beginning to get my bearings, I felt Jeremy's hand being ripped away from mine. I whipped around and couldn't quite believe what I saw. Jeremy had dropped the torch, and it was on the ground, blinking on and off, so every couple of seconds, we were getting a glimpse of the situation. Jeremy was being lifted up into the air by a gangly-looking woman who was covered in rotting flesh. Her skin was dark gray and her body was oozing liquid from every orifice. She was wearing torn, waterlogged clothing that seemed to sag on her body. Her arms and legs were covered in scaly wrinkles, spotted with openings that looked almost like gills. The woman's green eyes bulged as she stared at Jeremy, a wide smile forming in her thin, decaying lips. My boy, she said, opening her mouth and sliding out a grimy green tongue. As she licked the side of Jeremy's face, I stood there frozen. I wanted to help my friend, but I was paralyzed by fear. Let him go, yelled Emily, charging at the gruesome woman. Stay away, she screamed. Her scream was so loud that it stopped Emily in her tracks, bringing her to her knees. I felt like my head was going to explode as I collapsed to the ground. The woman's face twisted into a snarl. She walked forward and lifted her foot into the air, bringing it down with tremendous force onto Emily's already injured ankle. I saw Emily's face contort in pain as she clutched her foot. I would have heard her scream if my ears weren't still ringing like crazy. But I could see the intense pain etched into her expression. Smiling, the woman leaned forward and kissed Jeremy on the cheek as he violently tried to wriggle free from her grasp. I could see the fear in Jeremy's eyes. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let my friend down, not again. This whole night, Emily had been the one to throw herself into danger to help Jeremy, but I'd always been too much of a pussy to actually do anything. Making sure the woman was still distracted by Jeremy, I slipped my backpack off and grasped it in my hands, slowly, silently getting to my feet. I stepped forward, and I launched the backpack at the woman with as much force as I could muster. It collided with her face, causing her to lose her grip, and Jeremy, eliciting a shrill scream from her lips. No! As Jeremy scrambled free, I ran over to his torch and grabbed it, quickly shining it around to find the exit. The light emanated by the torch continued to flash on and off, showing me short snapshots of every different part of the well. Wall, wood slat, puddle. Come on, I muttered. Give him back! My heart was pumping furiously in my chest, and my hands were cold and clammy as the woman's shrill voice invaded my ears. Leave us alone, bitch! I heard Emily scream somewhere in the darkness. At that moment, I almost lost grip on the torch and my hands slipped off its handle for a second. On instinct, I thrust out my hand and just managed to grab it before it collided with the floor. I want my child! I heard Jeremy. God, no! Gritting my teeth, trying to block out the panic around me, I raised the flickering light again. Night sky, construction tools, stairs. Stairs! Yes! I yelled. The light blinked off and then on again, only this time the grotesque face of the woman was illuminated. Her expression twisted into a snarl. I jerked back, but it was too late. The woman reached out and grabbed the torch in my hands, hissing wildly, and suddenly everything came to a stop. My eyes were filled with bright light as I experienced a shock so intense I thought I was going to pass out. I recoiled. The torch slipped out of my hands. The next thing I knew, I was on the ground in the fetal position, my limbs shaking. I was in utter agony. The pain felt like someone had sucker punched me in the balls twice. Ty! I heard somewhere, disembodied voices in the darkness. I could only barely hear them over the white noise invading my ears. Next, I heard their footsteps pounding on the ground, coming closer. Then Jeremy's face came into view. He was holding the torch I dropped. Holy shit, Ty, are you alive? I heard him clearly that time, the effects of the shock beginning to wear off. Barely, I croaked out before my breath caught in my throat and I launched into a coughing fit. Jeremy put his hands on my back before I felt someone else slide next to me. I felt a hand on my neck, 2 fingers checking my pulse. You can have permanent damage. It looked like some kind of electric shock, Emily said. I could hear the concern in her voice, so I turned to look at her. You're pretty busted up yourself, I said, nodding to her mangled ankle. I'll be fine. Jeremy's the one who got slobbered on, she responded, smirking at Jeremy. His response was to immediately heave his guts onto the floor, as if the memory was stained in his mind. I'm never gonna follow you guys into a water tank again, by the way, Jeremy said, his face gone completely white. What happened to her? I asked, realizing we were no longer being pursued. Jeremy wiped his mouth, shined his torch to our left. See for yourself. The light illuminated the body of the woman. Her flesh was charred, smoke rising from her eyebrows. Clearly she'd been shocked just as bad as I was, maybe worse. Is she? Emily trailed off, gazing at the motionless woman. I don't know. I don't think we should hang around to find out. I know I'm not. I want to get as far away from here as possible. Whatever she is, Jeremy said. He extended his hand to help me up. As I grasped it, I felt an aching pain radiating across my palm. I jerked my hand back and saw the gnarly burns indented into it. At least I'm not unconscious, I said, shrugging. Jeremy helped Emily up, who braced herself on my shoulder. I brought my arm around her waist to support her. We slowly made our way towards the stairs like some 3-legged race contestant. While we moved, I began to actually think about what had just happened. There were so many questions. Who was this woman? Was she even alive in the first place? She looked like a drowned corpse. But somehow she could walk and talk. And boy, could she talk. I doubted I'd ever be able to hear her properly for days. The woman was also fascinated with Jeremy for a reason I didn't yet understand. Regardless, the first order of business was to get the hell out of Dodge before any more weird shit happened. We began to ascend the stairs, which creaked beneath our feet. Just take it slow, I said. We had made it halfway up the stairs when I heard Jeremy curse. I flipped around to see that all that was left of Jeremy was his head and his arms. One of the stairs had given way and he'd fallen through, his hands clutching the ground, the only thing stopping him from plunging into the darkness below. I cursed under my breath, crouching down and extending my arm to help Jeremy. Emily reached out to help bring him up. We slowly began to lift him up, but suddenly we felt resistance on the other end. Someone was pulling him back down. He's mine! The woman seemed to have unnatural strength. It felt like I was in a tug-of-war with a giant. It was then that I realized that either she had jumped up to grab him and we were pulling against her entire body weight, or she'd somehow contorted her own body to reach him. "I'm not gonna let go," repeated Emily. But it was no use. Jeremy's eyes grew wide as he slowly began to be pulled back down. Guys, please," he said, tears forming in his eyes. I felt my heart sink as Jeremy was ripped from our grasp and plummeted down to the floor, landing with a sickening thud. Emily began sobbing quietly as all the other noise suddenly stopped. There were no more falling slats, there were no more screams. Even the wind had died down. I took a deep breath. I prepared for the worst. Slowly, I looked through the hole that Jeremy had just fallen through. On the ground lay Jeremy, with the woman's arms wrapped around him. He had landed on her, and he was alive. I breathed a huge sigh of relief. Jeremy, you okay? Jeremy slowly managed to raise his hand and give a thumbs up. I turned to Emily, who was looking bewildered. "He's alive," I said. "Well, we'll go get him," she exclaimed, relieved. I turned back to Jeremy. "I'm coming!" Leaving Emily, I began racing down the rickety stairs, hopeful for the last time the night. Reaching the floor, I tried my torch, finding it was now fully operational. Lighting up the path in front of me, I was able to find Jeremy easily. His clothes had been torn, his eyes looked glassy, and his backpack had nigh exploded from the impact, but he was still breathing. "Hey, buddy," I breathed, almost out of breath from pounding down the stairs. "Hey," he croaked. The old woman's arms remained wrapped around him, so the first order of business was to pull them off. I grabbed the grotty, decomposing arms, tried to pry them apart. No give. My anxiety began to build as I struggled mightily to try and loosen her grip, but it was no use. Her grip was unnaturally tight. When a disturbing thought went through my head. She looked like she was dead. But hadn't she looked that way the whole night? Just as I was pondering this, the woman's mouth fell open and water began to pour out of it. And this was no stream. This was like a full-born torrent shooting into the air, raining down on Jeremy and I. Oh shit, I gasped as foul liquid began to pool around us. "What's happening?" asked Jeremy, still semi-conscious. "Don't worry, I'm gonna get you out of here," I tried to reassure him. Knowing I couldn't pull her arms off myself, I picked up the torch and began searching around for something sharp to try to cut through her grasp. Scanning the ground, my eyes fell on a saw that had been lying next to a 2x4 piece of wood, likely left behind by a worker. "Hurry, Ty!" called Emily, who was no doubt watching in horror at the situation unfolding below her. Picking up the saw, I quickly returned back to Jeremy, who was now nearly submerged in water. If I didn't free him now, he would drown. Gritting my teeth, I frantically began to try and cut through the woman's arms with a saw. Sickening green liquid began to ooze from her arms as I desperately hacked away. The smell was like nothing I'd ever experienced. It smelled like death mixed with vomit. And I gagged as I continued to cut through the woman's sagging flesh. I closed my eyes and I tried to block out the sight and smell of what I was doing. Just focused on dragging the saw up and down, and I felt the saw collide with something hard and brittle. I opened my eyes to see something white sticking through the gore of that woman's arm. I had to cut through her bone, but I didn't know if I'd be able to hack through it. Jeremy coughed and heaved. The water level was now nearly above his head. I tried to support his head as I cut, and I helped him breathe, but it didn't work. I couldn't keep his head up and hack through the woman's bone at the same time. "Ty," said Jeremy, coughing loudly. "I don't want to die. I know. Tears stung my cheeks. I could barely will myself to look at him. I didn't want to watch my friend die. Knowing I had little time left, I let Jeremy's head sink underneath the water and grasped the woman's arm with both hands. Quickly, I brought my knee forward and braced it onto her arm. With all of my strength, I pulled backwards, trying to snap the bone. Nothing. As much as I pulled, the bone resisted, as if it was completely locked in place. A feeling of helplessness rushed through me as I heard Jeremy sputtering. No, I said, slamming my fist onto the ground. There was nothing I could do. The water level had risen too high, the liquid was still spilling out of the woman's mouth, and now Jeremy's head was almost submerged. Having barely made it through the woman's first arm, I gave up. I dropped the saw and I met Jeremy's eyes. "Tell Mom, I'm sorry," he said, tears running down his face and mixing with water. Before I could reply, the water rose above his head, completely submerging it. Jeremy thrashed as he tried desperately to get a breath of air, but I knew it was no use. And I couldn't bear to watch. I stood up, and I began to wade my way through the water back to the stairs. "I'll tell her." Emily and I ascended the stairs in silence. She hadn't spoken to me since I'd made it back to her. I could tell she was angry, but I couldn't keep pretending that nothing had happened. "What the fuck are we gonna do?" I said, breaking the silence as we reached the top of the stairway. The water had now almost completely consumed the stairway, but it was no longer rising. Emily paused, her back turned to me while she was propped on a wooden slat that she had been using as a walking stick. The question hung in the air, daring either of us to answer. "Emily, say something," I said, tears beginning to well up in my eyes. "It's my fault," Emily responded, turning to face me. 2 black streaks ran down her face, her makeup unable to hide the devastation of losing a close friend. "I pushed him to come with us when he was so scared." "You didn't do anything wrong. How could you know what was going to happen?" I reasoned, trying more than anything to make myself feel less guilty. "We didn't know what we were walking into." Emily let out a long sigh and tried to wipe her eyes with her jumper sleeve, smudging her makeup even further so it left angry black circles on her cheeks. I could see the pain in her eyes as she looked back up at me. "You know, you're right. We didn't know. And that's why Jeremy's dead." The rest of the way home, we tried to work out what we would tell our parents. One thing was clear, we didn't want to tell our parents anything less than what had happened. Even though it was tempting to lie, try to make it look like we weren't crazy. The truth was, something supernatural happened inside the tank, and we wanted to at least tell our parents exactly what went down. We were going to tell them that there'd be another body at the bottom of the tank, wrapped around Jeremy. Even if it might be bad for us in the long run, we would be honest and hope the evidence would support us. For Jeremy. Parsky police found Jeremy's body, alone, at the bottom of the tower's water tank. There was no old woman attached to him. There was no water either. The tank was completely empty. Because our statements directly contradicted to what the police found, we were both brought in for further questioning. We became the 2 main suspects in the mystery of how a local boy had drowned in an empty water tank. Although police could confirm we were with Jeremy the night he died, there was no physical evidence that suggested that we had caused his death. The case became a national media sensation, with TV reporters coming from all over to report on the story. Seeing Jeremy's tearful mother plead with us to confess to his murder really drove the nail, but I did sympathize with her. Losing a son was not a pain that I could yet comprehend. I barely saw Emily outside the police questioning during this time, and we were drifting apart as the reality of being directly involved in the death of another person consumed us. Eventually, we were cleared of any crime by police, although Jeremy's family took us to civil court, trying to get a ruling of manslaughter. That was settled out of court, though. Mom never told me exactly for how much. And then, well, we went on with our lives. Emily and her family moved away from Parsky while I was finishing my schooling there despite virtually having no friends anymore due to the incident. Then I moved away to UCLA, started earning my physics degree, trying to put the past behind me. And to be honest, I hadn't thought about what happened till the fateful night that we visited the water tank on the edge of town for months. Until this morning, when I got a text from an unknown number. Ty, it's Emily. You need to come back to Parsky. Another boy has died. We need to get to the bottom of this. For Jeremy. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to tell you thank you for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's podcast. You can find MrCreepyPasta Storytime on any kind of podcasting platform if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're listening to the podcast already, you can find MrCreepyPasta on YouTube. For those of you that are interested in seeing me do more than just tell scary stories, you can also check me out at twitch.tv/MrCreepyPasta. During the weekdays around 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, I usually stream video games, and sometimes they're Resident Evil, and sometimes they're not. I'm also on Patreon. You can find a whole bunch of other people supporting on Patreon in the description down below, but there is a very, very special thank you to these people in particular. Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Creepypasta Adam, Ken Lando Higuchi, Mazakine, Champinski, The Red Oak Shield Virus, G. Weevil 3, Diana Kraus, Stephen Van Huss, Chance Burton, Tristan Pelton, Nico Cow, The Ginger Bros, Last Blade Song, Eliminator 86, Steampunk Sinner, Caleb Dougal, Sky Harbor, The Homeless Bird 93, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, Aaron Stormcrow, Barbara Maceo, Thomas Burgett, Azazel Rotten, S-Man, Kirisuba, Bad Honey, Someone You Love, Said the King 56, Somber Puppet, Wolfie Nums, Shadow Morningstar, Sean Mills, Jesse Gonzalez, Mad Marstomp, Z. Kearley, Cassie Core, Mr. Thud, and Patrick Schoolmeister. These guys are the real MVPs, and all of you who are listening are also the real MVPs. Stay safe, everyone, and sweet dreams.